The smell of bleach on Mom is ruining the taste of my $1,000 wine. My daughter-in-law said that, right in the middle of her birthday party. Your mom was on her knees, wiping a stain off the dance floor that overlooked the Hudson River. I was standing out on the balcony, holding a cheap glass of water, watching my son turn his face away, like he didn't even know her. No one in that room knew the woman they were mocking had just received an emergency signal through her earpiece. And no one knew that, in just a few minutes, a helicopter would land for her. If you're listening to this story and you felt your heart skip just now, go ahead and subscribe. Leave me a comment telling me which country you're watching from. I read every single one, because every family story begins under a very specific roof in a very real place. But that night, everything didn't start falling apart when the helicopter appeared. It began years earlier, inside our own home. I didn't walk over when Ruby said that. I just adjusted my cuff, like it was the most important thing in the world. In places like this, people think the quiet one is the weak one. They don't understand. Some of us stay quiet because we're calculating. Your mom didn't look at me. She kept wiping the floor. Slow, steady, the kind of rhythm that comes from years of habit. I knew what she was doing, and I knew why I had to stand still. The music kept playing. Soft gold light spilled across the polished wood of that rooftop bar. Beyond the glass railing, the Hudson lay still, dark as a sheet of metal. The guests wore tailored suits, shimmering gowns. They laughed like the world revolved around the champagne in their hands. And your mom, Erin, was kneeling. She held the mop with both hands, slow, firm. A young guest had drunk too much and left a mess right in the walkway. No one wanted to step over it. No one wanted to bend down, so she did. I know Erin didn't have to do that, but she always does. Ruby stood nearby, phone in hand, nails painted the color of red wine. She didn't shout, didn't make a scene. She simply leaned down and handed Erin a half-used stack of napkins, like she was offering some small favor. Next time, if Mom wants a side job, maybe pick a mall farther away. Don't clean at my party. My friends might think I hired someone from a nursing home. Her voice was light, just loud enough for the people around her to hear, and they heard. A few glances, a few tight smiles. Erin didn't lift her head right away. She only said, "I'm sorry if I caused any inconvenience." That sentence sat heavy in my chest. Not because of shame, but because I knew she wasn't sorry. She was conserving energy. I looked at Miles. My son stood near the bar, talking to two men I assumed were business partners. He laughed loudly, his hand resting on one man's shoulder. When his eyes passed over his mother, he turned away quickly, like he hadn't seen her at all. It wasn't the first time. Ever since Erin started her part-time job in Manhattan, Miles acted like it was a scratch on his perfect resume. Successful marketing director, Riverview apartment, beautiful wife, rooftop party once a month. In that picture, a gray-haired woman pushing a cleaning cart didn't belong. I took a sip of water. They served every kind of wine here. Names longer than my own biography. But I always ordered water. Habit from my Navy years. Keep your head clear, especially when everything around you starts to look too polished. Erin stood up. She rolled the mop cart toward a shadowed corner near the service door. When she turned her back to the crowd, I saw what no one else did. A tiny red light, tucked beneath her silver hair behind her ear. Blinking, not fast, not urgent, just steady. I knew what that rhythm meant, but my expression didn't change. For years we've had an understanding without words. I don't ask for details. She doesn't explain the mission. I only know her cleaning jobs often line up with crowded events. Complex equipment, automated control systems. And tonight this building ran almost entirely on a smart management system. Miles walked over just as Erin slid the mop back into the cart. "Dad," he said, lowering his voice tight and controlled. "Can you keep Mom in the back? My partners are here." I looked him straight in the eye. I didn't see cruelty, just fear of losing his image. "What are you afraid of?" I asked. He sighed. "I just want things to look professional. Professional. I've been in engine rooms at sea in the middle of the night, where one loose bolt could ruin an entire ship. I've watched silent men fix things no one ever saw, so others could sleep peacefully. Professional doesn't live in a suit." But I didn't say that. Erin stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "It's okay," she said. "I'm used to it. Used to it. That was the part that scared me most. Disrespect repeated long enough starts to feel normal. Ruby returned to the small stage in the center of the floor. It was time to cut the cake. The lights brightened. Phones lifted everywhere. Erin stepped back toward the glass doors where a soft wind drifted in from the river. She looked out into the distance. Her eyes weren't tired, not like someone finishing a long shift. The red light behind her ear kept blinking. I moved closer, just enough to whisper, "Something wrong." She didn't look at me. Not yet. One word. Short. Then she checked her watch. At that exact moment, the sound of the city seemed to shift. Not an explosion, not anything loud. Just a thin pause, like the wind about to change direction. Inside, Ruby laughed and asked everyone to raise their glasses. Miles clapped. No one noticed the temperature control screen near the bar flicker once. I looked at my wife. She no longer looked like a woman working a side job for extra money. She was waiting, and I understood. This party, with all its glitter and quiet insults, was only the backdrop to something much larger, moving closer by the second. The temperature control screen flickered once. No one noticed, except Erin and me. The music kept playing. Ruby had finished cutting the cake. Glasses were raised, photos taken, locations tagged. The city below still glowing, like nothing had slipped out of orbit. But I saw Miles look toward us again. He didn't look at his mother for long, just long enough to make a decision. "Mom, Dad, step inside for a minute," he said, keeping his voice even. "I need to talk to you, privately." Ruby stood beside him, arms crossed. She didn't object. She didn't smile either. We followed them into the VIP lounge behind the bar. The glass door closed. The music became distant, like it was filtered through thick fabric. The lights in there were whiter, cleaner, soundproofed, a good place to say things you don't want overheard. Miles didn't waste time. He placed a thick envelope on the table, opened it, a check, $100,000. The number written neatly, his signature at the bottom. "Take this," Miles said. "Move somewhere else. Arizona, Nevada, anywhere. Just not New York." No raised voices. No fists on the table. He spoke like he was proposing an investment. Ruby stepped closer. "We don't want to make this dramatic," she said. "But image matters. Mom showing up at events like this, it's not appropriate." Erin didn't look at the check. She looked at her watch. I noticed the second hand. It had just passed a clean mark. Miles read our silence his own way. "You're not short on money," he added. "This is just an arrangement to make things easier for everyone." Easier. I studied the check. Not because of the amount. I once worked an entire year to keep a ship from shutting down in the middle of the ocean. Money to me has always been a tool. Nothing more. I picked it up, thick paper, fresh ink. Erin still said nothing. Ruby exhaled softly, like she believed this was going well. "I just want to protect my brand," she said. "My friends keep asking why Mom does that kind of job. I don't know what to tell them." That was when Erin finally lifted her head. Her eyes weren't angry, weren't hurt, just calm. "Money can't buy safety," she said quietly. Miles frowned. "What does that even mean?" Erin didn't explain. I looked at my son for a few more seconds. Then I tore the check in half. The sound of paper ripping in that quiet room was louder than I expected. Not violent, just final. Ruby stepped back. "What are you doing?" Miles asked. His professional tone was gone. "I'm returning something that doesn't belong to me," I said. He stared at the torn pieces on the floor like they were a personal insult. "You don't understand," he said. "The world runs on image." I nodded slowly. "You're right," I told him. "And sometimes image hides what actually matters." At that moment the lights flickered. Not off. Just dimmed for a beat, then returned. Miles glanced at the ceiling. "Probably the electrical system," he muttered. Erin looked toward the river, through the glass. The red light behind her ear stopped blinking. It shifted to a soft blue. I knew that change wasn't random. Outside, the music cut off mid-song. No transition, no apology from the DJ. Just sudden silence. Then the murmuring began. Miles opened the VIP door. "What's going on?" he asked a staff member rushing past. "Automatic door locks are malfunctioning," the man replied quickly. "Elevators are paused. We're checking it." Ruby glanced around, the confidence fading from her face for the first time. Don't tell me someone hacked the building, she said, half joking. No one laughed. The air conditioning shut down. The large screen behind the bar went dark. Some guests pulled out their phones, but the signal was weakening. Miles turned back to Aaron. There was something new in his eyes now. Not embarrassment, unease. Is this serious? He asked. No marketing director voice this time. Aaron stepped out of the VIP lounge. She pushed her cleaning cart into the center of the floor as emergency lights began glowing in faint strips along the walls. The crowd grew restless. A few people headed for the exits, only to find the doors unresponsive. I walked beside her. Is it time? I asked quietly. She nodded. Not panic yet, she said. But if we wait a few more minutes, it won't stay contained. Miles stood there trying to catch up with what that meant. Do you know what's happening? He asked. I looked at my son. There were many things I wanted to say. I wanted to ask him if $100,000 could buy back this moment. I wanted to ask if the smell of bleach still ruined his wine. But I only said this, stay calm, and listen to your mother. Erin stopped near a technical cabinet. She opened the bottom compartment of her cart. Inside wasn't just cleaning solution. I saw the specialized tablet she carried on her part-time shifts. She took it out, removed the old apron, folded it carefully. Her movements changed. No longer the slow rhythm of someone ending a shift. Now they were precise. The emergency lights reflected across her face, revealing the steady resolve I've known for over 40 years. Miles stood a few steps away. What is happening? He repeated. Erin didn't look at him. She touched the screen. Blue light washed over the hands Ruby once called inappropriate. I'm going to restore the system, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but everyone nearby heard it. But you need to understand something. Just because you don't see a thing doesn't mean it isn't there. I stood behind her, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt something else. Clear. Solid. That torn check on the floor, it didn't matter anymore. Because in just a few minutes, this room and everyone in it would learn what real value looks like. Erin didn't say another word after that. She leaned over the tablet. Her fingers moved slow, but certain. Blue light reflected across her face, tracing the lines Ruby once said were not camera-friendly. Around us, the murmuring thickened. A young woman tried the emergency exit. The handle wouldn't move. An older man demanded to know why the elevators had stopped. No clear answers. The sound system stayed dead. Phone signals dropped, one bar at a time. Miles stepped closer. Mom, what are you doing? He asked. The control in his voice was gone. Erin didn't look up. Keeping this place from shutting down completely, she said. I caught that phrase, shutting down completely, and knew she was choosing the gentlest wording possible. She tapped the screen again. A building schematic appeared. Small, blinking lights on multiple floors. Not just the rooftop. This isn't a routine malfunction, she said quietly, just loud enough for me. The navigation and auto-lock systems are being accessed from outside. Miles stared at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. Ruby stepped back, still clutching her phone, though it was nearly useless. You mean someone's doing this on purpose? Erin lifted her head. Her eyes didn't land on Ruby. They swept the entire room. There are people who like to test how far they can go, she said calmly, and there are people who make sure they don't go too far. A mechanical sound clicked near the main entrance, not a crash, but the hum of a system trying to reboot, then stopping halfway. The crowd flinched. Voices grew louder. Anxiety spread faster than the wine ever had. I stepped slightly forward, shielding the path to Erin. Step back, I said, firm but steady. Give her space. No one argued. Maybe they sensed this wasn't a party anymore. Erin pulled a small device from her pocket and connected it to the tablet. The screen shifted modes. Lines of code moved fast, but not chaotic. I didn't understand the details, but I understood my wife's breathing. Still steady. Sean, she said softly, eyes never leaving the screen. South side. I nodded. No explanation needed. I moved to the southern exit of the rooftop. 2 guests were shaking the handle. I placed my hand on the door. Stay calm, I said. It's being reopened. A young man snapped. How do you know that? Who are you? I looked him in the eye. I'm someone who knows panic doesn't help. He fell quiet. Behind me, Erin's voice carried not loud but clear. I need 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Sounds short, but in a room slipping toward chaos, 3 minutes can shape everything. Miles stood in the middle of the floor, looking around. No longer the host, no longer in control. Just a man who didn't know what to do next. Ruby grabbed his hand. "Should we call someone?" she whispered. "No signal," Miles said dryly. A soft beep came from Erin's tablet. She exhaled lightly. "Lower floors are open," she said. "System is rerouting." I felt the change immediately. The south door handle trembled under my hand. I pushed. The door opened. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just smooth. Like it had never been locked. Cool air flowed in. The crowd behind me released a shared breath. "This way is clear," I said. No one rushed. No one shoved. Maybe they still didn't understand what had just been prevented. Erin remained in the center of the floor. 2 more minutes to stabilize everything she said, like she was reporting to someone unseen. I knew she wasn't talking to me. A man in a black suit approached from the far corner. I'd noticed him earlier, without thinking much of it. Not a guest, not quite staff either. He gave Erin a small nod. "Signal from Central confirmed," he said quietly. "We're monitoring." Miles looked at them, confused. "Central?" what he asked. No one answered him. Erin touched the screen one last time. The blinking lights steadied. Auxiliary systems came back online. Air conditioning resumed. A few display screens lit up again. The music did not return. No one asked for it. In that moment I saw the shift in people's eyes. They no longer looked at Erin like a cleaning lady. They looked at her like an anchor. Ruby released Miles' hand. She stared at the cleaning cart. Then, at the device in Erin's hands. The pieces were rearranging in her mind. "This wasn't random." "Was it, Ruby?" asked her voice, smaller now. Erin finally looked at her son and daughter-in-law. "Not everything is meant to be displayed," she said. "Some work has to be done in silence." Miles opened his mouth, but nothing came out. From above the river I heard a sound I knew well. Not a siren, not an ordinary engine. Rotors slicing through the night air, still distant, but coming closer. I looked up at the Manhattan sky. Erin heard it too. She powered down the tablet, folded it, slipped it inside her old jacket. The crowd began moving calmly down the reopened stairwell. No panic now, just a heavy quiet. Miles stood frozen. "Dad," he said, his voice rough. "Who is Mom?" Really, I looked at my son for a long moment. The rotor blades grew louder. "Tonight," I said slowly, "you're going to find out." The sound of the rotors was no longer distant. It wasn't loud in a dramatic way, but in air already stretched thin. That steady chopping cut straight through what was left of the party's shine. Wind swept in from the Hudson. Half-finished glasses trembled on the tables. A few guests looked up, shielding their eyes, as they searched the dark sky above the neighboring building. The helicopter came in from the west. Low, controlled, no commercial logo, no flashy lights, just navigation beams, and a sleek dark body holding steady in the air. Miles looked at me. "Dad, that's not for Mom, right?" I didn't answer. I looked at Erin. She didn't seem surprised. She simply removed her rubber gloves, folded them neatly, and placed them back into the cart. Slow movements. Like she was ending an ordinary shift. The helicopter hovered just beyond the glass railing. It didn't land. It held position. A rope dropped down. Then 2 figures in dark gear descended with precise control onto the rooftop balcony. No one screamed. Maybe they were too drained to react. The 2 unclipped moved forward, not running, not shouting commands. Just direct, focused. They stopped in front of Erin. One of them gave a short nod. "Ma'am," he said clearly, "all remaining points are contained. Central is requesting you on site." Ruby stepped back. Miles stood frozen, like his feet had locked in place. I walked over to Erin. Not to shield her, not to question her. I unbuttoned my coat. Inside, I always carry a folded jacket, not for ceremony, just habit. Erin never liked appearing unfinished. I placed it over her shoulders. She looked at me for 1 second. Just one. No thank you. No drama. Just the understanding of 2 people who've lived long enough not to need words. Erin removed the old apron. Underneath wasn't a gown. Not a power suit. Just simple fitted work clothes. On the left side of her chest, a small, pale gold insignia, almost hidden in the light. The closest guest noticed first, then another, then another. Silence spread faster than gossip ever could. Ruby stared at the insignia. What, what is this? She whispered, like speaking louder might shatter something. Aaron didn't turn to her. Sean, she said softly. You stay. I nodded. Miles stepped forward, finally finding his voice. Mom, you never said. Erin looked at her son. Some work doesn't belong at the dinner table, she said, and not because it's shameful. Miles swallowed hard. He glanced at the two operatives who had come down from the helicopter. They weren't looking at him. They were waiting. How long have you been doing this? He asked. Long enough to know image isn't what keeps this city running, Erin replied. The rotor wind picked up again. Her silver hair lifted gently, but never wild. One of the operatives handed her a smaller, more specialized earpiece. She took it, secured it, adjusted it in seconds. I'm heading out, she said to me. No long goodbye, no embrace, no hands held. We're used to that. Ruby suddenly stepped forward, her voice trembling. I didn't know. Erin looked at her fully for the first time that night. Not knowing isn't a crime, she said calmly. But looking down on someone because you don't understand them, that's a choice. Ruby lowered her eyes. Miles stood there, his shoulders no longer squared like when he offered that check. The rope dropped again. A harness clipped in. Erin stepped onto the railing without hesitation. Precise, like she'd done it 100 times before. The rotors grew louder as she was lifted. The crowd behind us was completely silent. No photos, no live streams, no talk of branding. Just eyes following a woman they had called inappropriate minutes earlier. The helicopter rose higher. Erin didn't wave. She only turned her head once to look down. I don't know if she was looking at me, at our son, or at the whole city. Then the aircraft pivoted and moved off toward the brighter skyline. The sound faded. The wind settled. The rooftop was left with half-finished drinks, a half-cut birthday cake, and a truth laid bare in front of everyone. Miles kept staring at the empty sky. Dad, he said quietly. What have I done? I looked at my son. The pride was gone from his eyes. The fear of losing image was gone too. What remained was a space money couldn't fill. You chose to look down instead of looking closely, I told him. Ruby said nothing. She stared at the cleaning cart still standing in the center of the floor. The mop. The faint streaks of water. Those simple things. Tonight kept this place from falling apart. I adjusted my collar. The birthday party had ended long ago, even if no one announced it. And what remained wasn't humiliation. It was a lesson. But that lesson wasn't finished yet. The wind had stopped. The music didn't resume. The staff began cleaning up in silence, as if they understood there was nothing left to celebrate tonight. Miles was still standing there, staring at the patch of sky where the helicopter had disappeared. The city lights reflected in my son's eyes, but for the first time, I didn't see his usual confidence. Just a man trying to understand his mother. I walked slowly toward the stairwell. I don't like elevators, especially after what just happened. Dad, wait, Miles called out. I stopped but didn't turn around right away. I didn't know Mom did things like that, he said, his voice hoarse. I thought she just... He didn't finish the sentence. You thought she just cleaned. I finished it for him. Miles lowered his head. I was ashamed of that, he admitted. I kept thinking, what would my friends think? I looked at my son for a long moment. Do you know what your mother has been cleaning up for 30 years? I asked. Miles shook his head. Not just floors, I said slowly. She's cleaned up mistakes no one else ever sees. Gaps that could bring an entire system down. Things that if not handled in time would leave everyone in that room without the luxury of worrying about their image. Ruby stepped closer. She no longer kept her distance like before. I said things I shouldn't have said, she whispered. I didn't know. I nodded. Not knowing can be corrected, I replied. But attitude that has to be corrected by yourself. We walked down the stairs together. No one spoke for several minutes, only the soft echo of our footsteps in the narrow space. By the time we reached the lobby, the building staff had restored almost everything. Some guests were leaving, speaking quietly to one another. No one was laughing. Outside, the city was still bright. Taxis passed by. Pedestrians walked as if nothing had happened on the rooftop above. Miles stopped at the entrance. Dad, is Mom coming back? He asked. I looked at the traffic flowing past. Your mother never left, I said. You just hadn't seen her. Miles took a deep breath. I want to talk to her, he said. Properly. Not like tonight. Good, I replied. But when you do, don't ask her who she is. Ask her how long she had to stay silent. Ruby stood beside him, no longer holding her phone. She looked at me then, down at her high heels. I was too focused on building an image, she said. I forgot. Value isn't something you post online. I didn't smile. But something inside me softened, realizing that before it's too late. Is fortunate, I said. A black car pulled up in front of the entrance. Not military, just an ordinary civilian vehicle. I knew it was one of Aaron's. The back window rolled down slightly. Aaron sat inside. No apron, no visible insignia. Just my wife, her silver hair neatly brushed. She looked at me first. Everything all right, she asked. All right, I answered. She then looked at Miles and Ruby. There was no reproach in her eyes, only the faint fatigue of a long night. Miles stepped forward. Mom. I'm sorry, he said. No excuses. No explanations. Aaron looked at her son. Sorry doesn't change the past, she said gently, but it can change how you act starting tomorrow. Miles nodded. Ruby lowered her head as well. Aaron opened the car door and stepped out for a moment. She stood in front of them. I don't need you to be proud of my job, she said. I just need you not to be ashamed of it. No one answered immediately. The wind from the river moved down the avenue. The traffic light shifted in the distance. And never think a person's worth lies in the bag they carry or the title they hold, Aaron added. Worth lies in whether they keep the place they live safer and kinder. Ruby nodded slightly, her eyes red but dry. Miles looked at his mother as if truly seeing her for the first time. Tonight I understand, he said. Aaron placed a hand on his shoulder for a brief second. Understanding is enough, she replied. She returned to the car. Before closing the door, she looked at me. Go home first, she said. I'll make tea, I answered. The door closed. The car pulled away, slowly blending into the Manhattan traffic. I stood there with Miles and Ruby for a moment longer. No stage lights, no music, no clinking glasses. Just three people standing under the city sky, having learned a lesson not taught in any marketing course. The check you handed over tonight, I said, looking at Miles, isn't enough to buy a single second of your mother's life. Miles nodded. I know, he said. I turned and walked toward the sidewalk. Above us, the sky had returned to normal, as if no rotor blades had ever cut through it. But I knew something had changed tonight. Not in the city, but in the way my son looks at his mother. And sometimes that is what most needs cleaning. If this story touched you, if you have ever misunderstood someone you love because of how they appeared, take a second to press, like, not for us, but for all the quiet people who keep families and society running every day without needing applause. Subscribe and share this story so more people remember a person's worth is not found in titles or spotlights, but in kindness, responsibility, and what they do when no one is watching. Because sometimes what needs cleaning most is not the room but the prejudice within ourselves.